coming on down towards the Fluno Center and joining us for this presentation to introduce student digital ecosystem and specifically instructor roles, which will be interacting with the student digital ecosystem in a not too distant future. I should start by introducing myself. My name is Will Lipsky and I work within the Office of the Registrar, specifically within the Curriculum and Academic Management team. I'm delighted that I have several folks, both to my left and right, or to your left and right, vice versa, to help introduce how the student digital ecosystem and specifically instructor roles will intersect with various aspects of their lives and then likely your lives, whether that's through LMS systems, whether it's through APIS, whether it's through creating the schedule of classes. And so I'm delighted to have that as part of it. Also, just as fair warning, this is being recorded right now, and it will be out there live, available on YouTube later on, probably at the later on part of this week, early next week. So we know that there's a couple of other events that folks were not able to get this to, and so we are going to have this recorded. We'll have the slides available as well as part of that rollout moving forward, but this is going live. We have little index cards that you may have received on check-in. When we get to the question and answer part of the presentation, we'll be reading those questions specifically into the microphone, so this way we make sure that the recording does pick that up as well. What I would like to do first is, you already heard from me, my name is Will, I work within the Office of the Registrar. Invite my panelists who aren't going to be talking too much at the front end of the presentation, just to do a quick name and which SDE system they're representing. Michelle, you want to start?
Sure. I'm Michelle Young, Academic Planning and Institutional Research, and I am here representing kind of the policy side of why we need instructor roles, the qualified instructor policy, and then the different aspects of the curriculum information management system that need instructor information.
Hi, I'm Claire Moon from the same office, Academic Planning and Institutional Research, and I am here representing external reporting needs and the credits follow the instructor system, if anybody has any questions about that.
Hello, I'm Sandra Solomon. I work for Duet Academic Technology, and I am the admin, which is why I'm here, which is used for first evaluations on campus and a few other assessment pilots.
Dale Johnson with Duet Academic Technology, and I'm the campus admin.
I suppose I didn't ever announce that I'm representing CIS, and specifically what's coming in a not too distant future, Class Section Builder. So if you're a curricular rep, you'll be creating your new schedule of classes through Class Section Builder starting at the end of October. See the agenda behind us. The first couple of slides are going to be covered to my colleagues right over here. Joining us today, we have Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, Jocelyn Milner, and Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning, Steve Kramer. They're going to be covering the first bullet points of an introduction to the student digital ecosystem and then talking about the need and the strengths and benefits that will come with these new instructor roles. I'll preview the roles for you. We'll have a handout that you can bring back. We'll go through the panel and give a little introduction about how we plan to take on these roles and make our systems a little bit smarter, more efficient. I'll introduce the timeline for implementation and then we'll get to the questions. So without further ado, mic is on. Great. Steve Kramer.
Good. Thank you, Will. So how many of you have seen this figure before? Raise your hand. Okay. Quite a few. Not everybody. So this is the student digital ecosystem. And when you first look at it, you're going to say, well, so what? But it will impact your life sooner or later. It's certainly impacting ours. So let's talk about it. This is a system. And you may say, so what? Because you will recognize there are pieces there that have been there a long time. There's the student information system under there. There's our learning management system, currently D2L and Moodle, moving to Canvas, and other tools. We've done course evaluations forever, right? We've done them on paper, so on and so forth, so that's not really new. We used to have, I'm back from the day when we had an undergraduate catalog in print version, so we had that kind of stuff. We've had career services software on campus forever, so what's the big deal? Well, the deal here are the arrows. And having made this work together as a system. Think of it as like a car. You know, it doesn't work too good if you might be in the wheel world, you know, and your work just involves wheels. But if they're not connected to the engine at some point and working well with the engine, the car's not going to go. So we're working in almost all of these areas right now. All of them are flashing. All of them are being developed. And the hard part of this is to make them work together, the arrows in between. So, for example, definitions and standards. For a system to work together, you got to use the same terminology and have some standards. And instructors is an example of something that, as a community in the student digital ecosystem, we probably better agree on what an instructor is. Pretty fundamental to our business as the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So that's what you're going to hear about today. And as we work through these issues, you know, there's going to be some bumps along the way, but I want you to believe that in the end, your life is going to be better, and certainly the student's life is going to be better. One other aspect before I turn it over to my colleague. We can't continue to operate with disconnected parts. We're competing nationally and internationally as a university. And students and staff are experiencing systems that other universities are putting together at their home institutions. So this isn't something that we've just like completely dreamed up here and we're doing in isolation. We're in a nationally competitive environment, and we need to do this. We need to do this to succeed and function as a university. Let me turn it over to my colleague.
Thank you for being here today. So we are talking about instructor roles, but we are sort of revealing this progressively because we're going to tell you what we mean by that in a minute. I'm going to tell you why it matters first. So Steve initiated this, and he talked about the interaction. He talked about those arrows, and those arrows are really important in moving from an analog world, the world that we lived in, or these disconnected parts, or passing PDF documents or Excel files around, to something that will let us operate with efficiency and let computers do what they're really good at and let people do what they're really good at. But that means we have to put some structures in place to make that work. And one of the things that we want to really bring to the fore in this process is both the course instructor and the instructor roles, and together those help highlight existing definitions of those roles or create, sort of document them in a new way to help us implement policy that has been approved by our faculty. So specifically those arrows on the previous form, the previous slide, we saw arrows that connected, that connected SIF and the class schedule builder, so that's in the curriculum management tool. We need to be able to pass information back and forth. We need to be able to pass information back and forth between Canvas and the course evaluation tool, APHIS. And there are some other places where we're looking to pass that information about the instructor around, and what role they have in instruction actually turns out to be critical to making our policies work. Okay, so I'm going to, this is where I wanted to stop. So you'll get a lot of detail on each of these steps here in a minute. But I wanted to pause here and reiterate that the course instructor field, for those of you who are curricular reps, is a critical field. It has been that way for decades, ever since we've scheduled classes. Knowing who the instructor is a core piece of information, and it's foundational to communicating to students who their instructor is, and everything else that follows about that instructional piece follows from who that individual is. So that communication to the student is the primary reason. It also creates a permanent record. And that record helps us reflect institutional reality, to go back and see who did what. And in our electronic systems, it connects instructors with permissions for rosters, for grading, for access to the course evaluation system, and those are different based on their roles. But till now, we didn't have roles. I'd also note that data is a product of these business processes. And so we do use these data in our reporting and our analysis, but that is not the purpose of collecting this information. The purpose is to drive systems so they work for students and are responsive to the public. The reports then take those business processes and make logic that builds a report that reflects that reality. So this one, I wanted to note that these slides sort of are formulated around risks, and there are risks without changing. We are in a competitive environment. Steve mentioned that. Without changing, we won't keep up with our colleagues, our students. Any of you who have college-age children who go off somewhere else and tell you all the fun things they're doing at the institution they went to, we're trying to keep up with that. But more importantly, we have an opportunity to communicate better with students. And we have an opportunity to automate things, again, so that all of us can focus on things that people are good at, and we can let computers do repetitive, mundane, tedious tasks that they're really good at. You can read about the risks here, but there's an opportunity I wanted to highlight here, that as we go to the instructor roles implementation, that lets us implement the qualified instructor policy, which was approved a couple of years by the faculty and is required by our expectations for accreditation, that we know who our instructors are, so we know who they are and we know what they're qualified to do, and that as they come on to being employees, that they have the training that they need, and also that they have the background checks and the safety and security training that's expected for individuals who are interacting with our students. So by virtue of creating an accurate permanent record that communicates effectively with students, it's also useful for reporting and analysis. And I would point out one additional new benefit and potential for these data is that with the approval last week of the 2017-19 state budget by Governor Walker, he signed into law a mandate that we report on instructional activity for all of our faculty. So we will really be depending on accurate information about course instructor and instructor roles to support the efforts to meet those state mandates. So with that, I'll turn it over to Will.
Perfect. So this might be a couple of slides of repetition for folks who attended a curricular enrollment rep event on August 15th. I know not everyone in the room is, but we did build upon these slides a little bit. So what we're specifically talking about is PeopleSoft value, or SIS value of instructor roles. You unique and distinct from actually naming the instructor him or herself out there, but there is a one-to-one relationship of for every single section of a course, an instructor needs to have an instructor role. These are independent from various other values that you'll have when you enter someone into the meeting patterns page of a particular course. So grade level access will vary based on who the individual is and what they're doing for the particular class, as well as whether or not that instructor displays publicly to the student. And there would be some good reasons for that not to display. Sometimes it might be the health and safety of an instructor. Some of it might be their supervisory instructor of all English 100 sections. And so it would be more appropriate for the student to communicate with that instructor that she'll see on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to Professor Morris Young within the English department, who will not know who's student from lecture 1 versus lecture 57 of the English 100 course. We're going to be introducing these values, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about timeline in a couple of slides. But we're going to be introducing these values as part of the class section builder implementation that the curricular reps will be using to build schedule of classes summer 2018 onward. And part of the reason of why now are we doing this, we're wanting, as we're having this new tool become available, we want to build for the future, knowing that the interoperability of these systems is going to just help our efficiency and return of our investment, both human capital as well as fiscal capital. So we have 3 roles that we'll be talking about, and actually before I go too further, as questions are coming in, and if either one of our speakers beforehand or one of us says something, if you have a question and you did write it down on the index card, please pass it to an aisle, and then one of our folks from the RO will pick up those index cards so that we can get those recorded. So just an open invitation that as you get questions, please jot them down and pass them towards the aisles. So we are going to be implementing 3 various instructor roles: a principal instructor, a supervisory instructor, and an auxiliary instructor. So principal instructor, this is an individual who is a qualified staff member who is active in the course delivery and is recognized by the students as one of, if not the only, lead instructor for the course. This is usually the person physically in front of the course if it's a traditionally taught course. If it's an online-only course, it's the person who's monitoring the message boards, like leading the grade, etc. But it's the person who has the lead responsibilities to deliver the course content. All sections of the course must have at least one principal instructor. Supervisory instructors. This is a qualified staff member who oversees the courses and grading of a principal section of a course, so a range 1 section, when that principal instructor is not a qualified instructor. So a good example of this, and one that folks are very familiar with, and you'll see it probably rendered in one of the slides before, is English 100 is primarily delivered as far as instruction by graduate assistants, TAs. We know that TAs provide a lot of the instruction that we have here in the university. This couldn't provide its teaching and learning mission as part of the efforts that TAs and lecturer essays provide as part of our instructional mission. As part of accreditation standards and to implement the qualified instructor policy, we need to know who is that qualified instructional member, person of our UW-Madison teaching team, who's behind the scenes for there. So Morris Young is that individual for English 100. We need to know and be able to report on who those individuals are, besides just calling up the English department, calling up the French department, calling up African languages and African cultural studies. Sorry about that, African cultural studies. But we need to be able to have reported and known for reporting standards who are those supervisory instructors when that principal instructor is not with the appropriate accreditations out there. To clarify something that we mentioned at the instructor and curricular enrollment rep event on August 15th, this only needs to be assigned at the range 1 section of a course out there. So it's not going to be an expectation that you carry this down to the discussions, that you carry this down to the labs. We're going to make the system work harder and smarter, not make you all work harder and smarter as far as what's going on there. So this is only required at the range 1 section of a course. The final role that we're going to be implementing is an auxiliary instructor. And so this is an individual, a qualified instructor who provides a small portion of instruction to a section, but not have the overall or substantial responsibility of the delivery of the learning goals and the course instruction. Can we do a note card?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you, appreciate it. Please do the note card. We do need to have this individual within the instructor advisor database, we do need to record, Jocelyn mentioned a couple of reasons for this, anything from health, safety, students know who to communicate to, they might be wanting to be evaluated as part of the course evaluation mechanism. So the auxiliary instructor is it's not required in a particular course, but it's a way for an instructor to be formally recognized as part of the instruction that they are providing to that course. So we have a couple of screenshots for those of you who do not have the privilege of going into the SIS maintain schedule of classes. This is screenshots directly from there. These screenshots are going to be replaced by, like I said, the new tool that's going on at the end of October, Class Section Builder. But this is a tool that we have now. So these are screenshots of actual courses that we're offering right now this fall semester, and how we would be able to render the various instructor roles and how grades and or view access might be delivered as part of this. So this first example is a Genetics 467 course. There are two principals and instructors. Both of them are equally responsible for providing instruction, responding to student contact. As far as credits follow instructor, they both provided the same amount of work, and so we want to have that split evenly. So this particular instance has two principal instructors. Both are published in the schedule of classes, and they're both going to be having the ability to approve grades and send them over to Debbie Moy to get them officially entered as part of the process. Hi, Debbie.
I will.
This is another rendering of the English 100 example that I had here. Also very commonly, lower level language courses will be taught by graduate assistants, teaching assistants. These are principal instructors. Oftentimes there's a course coordinator, a course director that's called different things within various departments that you're in here. Steve mentioned earlier the value of having common definitions, and so what we're wanting to use throughout the common SDE system is this person has the supervisory responsibility of the course content out there. So this particular instructor supervises multiple sections of Spanish 102, but is probably not interested in having the individual student email the instructor saying, I'm going to be sick on Tuesday, what do I need to do to make it up? Or I'm curious about course evaluation content. So this particular rendering, we can see that the second member on this page is the supervisory instructor, but is not printed, which means this wouldn't display on the schedule of classes, but yet this person would be able to receive this evaluation if you wanted to go that route, would have access to the course website. For qualified instructor policy, we would know who's responsible for the overall educational content of Spanish 102. An example that uses an auxiliary instructor might be Psychology 202. It's a large lecture course where there are TAs who are associated with it, and so what we have here is we have somebody who does provide on occasion some guest lectures, or not guest because she's actually a component of the class, but actually provides content within the course, has some grading responsibilities, intersects with the learning management tool Canvas out there, and so we have a supervisory and we have an auxiliary. You can note that within this particular instance, the principal instructor has approved access for grading access, but the auxiliary instructor has the ability to grade, but ultimately they're asking in this instance that the faculty member signs off before submitting the grades to the office of the registrar. And then here's an example of a multi-component course. So Finance 300 is a lecture discussion type course. We have lots of lecture discussion, lecture lab discussion type courses, but wanted to render up one of a maybe a little bit more complicated instance where there's a multi-component course. So within the range 1 section, there's a faculty member who is a principal instructor, and this principal instructor is the only listed instructor on range 1. And then there's discussion 301, which is range 2 talk. This would also have a principal instructor, and this would actually be who the TA is if we're using HR titles as part of our title. This is the person who is delivering the content to the discussion section out there. And so we have a principal instructor within 301 of that individual, and it's assumed that the principal instructor on the range 1 section is the person who is the supervisory instructor, but no need on the curricular rep to carry that information down. We just look for range 1 to figure out who is the ultimate authority for this particular instance. I'm asking that the registrar's office pass out a handout because there's no way that you want to print out your phone and quickly take a screenshot for this. So I'm going to pause for 30 seconds while we have some handouts coming down the aisles. These handouts will also be uploaded online, and so if you wanted to find this at a later time and date, that will be available. Also, folks, as you're passing out handouts, if you have index cards. Angie's asking that you collect them now. We'll collect them throughout the afternoon, but this would be a good time to get some starter questions on the docket. And then I'm going to pause and wait for everyone to get these before I talk through this slide. All design credit for this decision-making guide goes to our friend John Warren from Hewitt Academic Technologies. I could not make something that's great. Thank you, John. All right, and thank you for our colleagues who distributed this out there. So what we have here is, I like to call it the decision tree. Okay, so I have an individual. How do I treat this individual as far as making an instructor role assigned to this particular instance? And so you can see, you start your way down the decision tree, and are we talking about range 1? And on the flip side of the sheet, we have some common definitions. So range 1 is curricular rep talk. It's a lot of curricular rep talk. You might be an APHIS administrator, and you might be saying range 1, what is this? So on the flip side of this paper, we do have some common data definitions that we have out there, as well as those longer definitions of the slide that I talked a little bit earlier about, specifically defining the 3 roles. So what you can see is you can work your way through this decision-making metrics, and you can say, okay, I'm talking about the primary lecture portion of Chemistry 103. Hi, Gene, I'm seeing you right up here. And so, okay, it's a range 1 section, so that means that I need to make a decision point of, is there one instructor to this range 1 lecture, or are there multiple instructors? And then you can see that I might be saying this one particular person is delivering the content within the lecture, and so that would make me, and I'm trying to read my slide, I don't have a handout out here, that would take me to the left of the tree. Most of it's going to the left. Most of the folks who are doing the instruction in Chemistry 103 are going to be qualified instructors, our faculty and instructional academic staff, and so they would be qualified instructors, and so we would just list those as principal, and we wouldn't need to have a supervisory instructor. Then once we get going on for the range 2 and range 3, we would know that we wouldn't have to worry as much about the qualifications of those individuals. We would just want to make sure that they are in the instructor advisor table and we assign them appropriately. So I've done a lot of talking, and I want to recognize the expertise of my colleagues to my left and your right, and so I'm going to ask that they walk themselves through these slides as far as how they're going to be impacted. Quick note on these slides is some of these slides, there will be some impact possibly based on HR appointment type, and others it won't matter so much. So we know that this is part of the HR system, and PeopleSoft has specific HR job codes that we can pull in to help make the system smarter, run more efficient, but that's something that we want to lean on the HR side of the fence in order to enter, and not on the backs of curricular reps, not on the backs of APHIS administrators, etc. So some of these slides, as our colleagues are introducing these moving forward, will have an additional column of HR type, and that's going to be something that we'll be getting. Ideally, that's the work that we do from our technical team that will be moving forward with this, using the official HR data as part of this. So without further ado, let's talk about APHIS.
Okay, so as you know, this is new roles in APHIS, it's future state. So now that we have defined roles on campus, that'll allow us to work with our vendor APHIS to actually utilize those roles within the system. So right now we use course evaluations. Over 70% of the departments on campus actually use APHIS. And a lot of you that are here are APHIS admins, and you know we run into issues when we have, say, 2 instructors and a TA. How do you decide to use who? Right now in APHIS, you have 1 primary, everyone else falls into the secondary role. So we've been super excited that this was coming, because it's really going to help us out a lot. So as you'll see on here, what will happen is they'll be using a combination of the instructor role with the HR appointments, so we'll be able to see in APHIS then if it's actually a TA or if it's actually a faculty member. So that will allow us to, instead of having different evaluations, we can probably use 1. That's all to be determined. We are not sure exactly how it's going to look in APHIS. Now that we've decided this, they are going to build their system to work with our different roles that we've defined. But you can see it here where we kind of outlined it for them. The supervisor will be able to see all the results of the evaluation, so they can see all the TAs, whereas TAs will only see their own. Even if there are 2 TAs in the same course, they would just see their own. However, if it's faculty that are teaching it, they will see each other's. They're equal, and that's a decision that came out of the vice provost's office. And then you'll see down the road there, too, down the line, that auxiliary would only see their own. They would not see other instructors. Everyone sees course evaluation information, just not the instructor portion of it.
Gail, how is Canvas excited about these roles?
Has gone into the MC role here.
So, with Canvas, we are very excited. One of the shortcomings we have today is TAs and teachers and auxiliary all come through as just teachers in Canvas. So with this implementation, we're looking at creating 3 brand new roles in Canvas: principal, supervisory, auxiliary. I think we'll continue the TA role. The TA role is going to be based on HR appointment. So if somebody's put into a course and there's an auxiliary, and their appointment is a TA, we're actually going to list them as a TA explicitly, so it's clear. I think we still need to identify that explicitly. So we need to figure out how these are going to differ in the course for our students. So I'll be going to our instructional technologist group, and we'll be starting to kind of evaluate what that looks like.
APIR colleagues. Claire.
So I'm planning on talking about 2 different systems. I said at the beginning, the credits follow the instructor system, and then we have our what we call CDR, which is our central data request that we report to UW system who instructors are. They have their own, it's like CIS, like a mirror of CIS for every UW institution, and we need to report to them who the instructors are of each section as well. But Jocelyn brought up when she was talking that we don't always know what's coming down the pipe. The proposed budget for this year has new workload reporting requirements that require us to report on things. So this isn't just limited to these 2 systems that will enable us to do other things that are sort of common requests. So the credits follow the instructor system, for those of you that don't know what that is a alternate to the credits follow the subject system. So right now, the student enrolls, I'm trying to think of a frequently cross, ag economics and economics, oh my God, there's a lot of classes between those 2 subjects are cross-listed. And one way to report is if the student enrolled under the ag economics subject, they're taking an ag economics class. If they enrolled under the economics side, they're taking an economics class. But really, it's the same instructor of that course. So the credits follow the instructor system is a methodology of attributing what department is paying that instructor and attributing the credits to that department. It was designed as if to follow the principal instructor. It really wasn't designed to have credits follow the supervisor or auxiliary instructors that are not doing the majority of the instruction. So this will help us refine that credits follow methodology. And for most places, it really comes into the idea with cross-listed classes or when instructors to other departments. For the most part, the credits follow the subject and credits follow the instructor are very similar. And then for our reporting to system, we think, conversation with Jeff from the registrar's office, who really is the person that does the actual work of submitting this. I think the intention of the CDR, the system data, is that we're reporting the principal instructor. That's what they meant in 1972 when they asked for this. I think. We will verify.
And advance the slide. Michelle, how will this intersect with the qualified instructor policy?
Well, last year, a policy was enacted that says that every course taught at UW-Madison will have a qualified instructor attached to it. And a qualified instructor is a person with a regular UW-Madison instructional appointment who has a degree, a level above the course that they're teaching or is otherwise qualified to teach that course. The level above, think of the example of if you're teaching an undergraduate course, the instructor should have at least a master's degree in order to be teaching that course. With the instructor roles, we will now be able to pull out and identify who those qualified instructors are much easier than we can currently. We use our favorite example of English 100. Currently, Morris Young isn't attached to that course. Now, anyone who knows how that course operates knows that Morris is very involved in the curriculum and the oversight of the teaching assistants who teach that course. But currently, that course would not be aligned with the qualified instructor policy because graduate students in the TA appointment do not align with the requirements of the qualified instructor policy. So the instructor roles will help us with this policy and with other policies related to human resources, making sure that our instructors go through the appropriate background checks and other HR policies and other policies on campus where we need to identify the person who is responsible for the course.
So, quick overview and timeline, and then I'm going to pass the mic to Angie. So, we are introducing these now. These will continue to be socialized throughout various governance groups out there, but we will be introducing these as part of the class section builder implementation. For curricular reps, this means October 25th, 6th, or 7th. You probably got an email or maybe 2 emails from me from this point about when that is happening. We are then implementing these to be first used and absorbed by the summer 2018 schedule of classes. As far as the enforcement for this, we will be enforcing the items of qualified instructors and known policy, but we've alluded to, Sandy's alluded to, Dale, we need to start building these systems with these rules so this way we can start accepting them and morphing the roles into the various sections going out there. So the first section that will see these new roles will be sections taught in summer 2018. So, Angie, you probably don't need this, you need this probably. More helpful. Oh.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Angie Reeves, and I'm the Curricular Enrollment Coordinator here. No. Okay. So we've been collecting some of the questions on cards, which is what we'll start with. We have about 45 minutes left to ask the panelists questions. Once we kind of run out of questions on the cards, or if we have additional questions come up, feel free to raise your hand. After you ask a question, myself or a panelist will repeat it back into the microphone as we are video recording this. And also just keep in mind that because we are going to be distributing this pretty widely, maybe don't use specific names, kind of speak a little bit more generally when asking questions. So I've tried to consolidate some of what you've submitted on cards because a lot of people have the same good questions. So if you could start off by answering, how will a curricular representative know if an instructor is qualified? And what is the procedure for adding or deleting instructors?
I'm guessing that's my question. So, how will a curricular rep know that an instructor is qualified? So, the curricular rep, the onus on them is to actually enter the instructor roles. We will be doing some auditing and reporting specifically to if a supervisory instructor is missing. You'll hear from us that a supervisory instructor is missing out there. Getting instructors added to be assigned to sections is part of an HR load process that we have. You might hear the word pitch table casually thrown out there. But it's a load process that if an individual has an appropriate instructional title, that instructor would then be able to be assigned at a particular course. We do recognize the fact that some instructional appointments happen the day before classes start, the day that classes start, etc. And so we need to possibly have the system a little bit more adaptable or flexible than the HR processes of, I just hired a chem TA and so I need to get this person assigned to a course. And so we do have a system where you can alert the registrar's office that we have a pending instructor. And so as long as you have an HR ID, we can get that individual assigned or available within the instructor advisor table. So you could assign that person to a course section. And then we audit to make sure that the HR process has gone through, but we don't want to hold instruction at harm if there's a new person to the instructor ecosystem that we have here. And so We want to be adaptable to the real-world needs that we have instructors that are hiring or join our UW campus community at the 11.5-hour basis as far as when courses are coming. I'm seeing some head nods, so that resonates. As far as how our instructors promote from the system, so instructors do become inactivated. If you haven't taught a class for the last 2 years, we do inactivate the instructors from the instructor advisor database, which would make them no longer accessible to be assigned into a course.
And follow-up question, will instructors of a certain role roll over from term to term?
So, course term roll, everyone's favorite spot or process that we do within our office, so you don't have to start from scratch. So for folks who are not curricular reps, I'm just going to find that in 10 seconds or less. What we do is when we create the fall 2018 schedule of classes, we assume and give you from a starting point what you left off with fall 2017, so you don't have to recreate your schedule of classes. So what term roll is we roll from the previous like term. Now that we got that definition, will instructor roles term roll? So we don't have instructor roles to term roll for the first 3 sections. So these values is fall 2018. We're not going to be able to say who was the qualified instructor or who was the principal instructor in fall 2017. So there'll be initial uptick for the first 3 schedule of classes that will be out there as far as instructor roles, as far as term roll. But then once that lift is completed, we can get instructor roles as part of the term roll process to roll to the previous like term.
Thank you. Next question is for the auxiliary instructor. Who defines small portion and substantial responsibility? So what might those definitions be, and how does this affect credit hours assigned to instructors?
I can take the second half at least. The intention right now is that auxiliary instructors are providing a small enough portion that the credits would not follow them. They would follow the principal instructor. But even if in 99% of the cases it won't matter, because if the issue with credits follow the instructor is will the department get credit for it, the department is likely paying the auxiliary instructor and they're likely paying the principal instructor. So it will make no difference whatsoever with that. I think that we've thrown around, I mean, some of these are judgments about what rises to the level of a substantial portion of instruction. I can come up with some things that I think meet that criteria, but that doesn't make them any more right than other people's ideas. And I think that I just wanted to say, in addition sort of to Will's first answer, is that the idea is that you won't know all of this yourself. You need the cooperation of your department chairs and people in your departments to tell you this, and we recognize that, and there will be subsequent communications to department chairs and departments about the importance of doing this, so you're not out there all by yourself. So maybe some questions that come to mind, you guys can all pitch in, is when it rises to the level of an auxiliary instructor, is this person listed on the syllabus as one of the instructors? Would this person ever be alone in a classroom? So would the principal instructor would the auxiliary instructor ever be there without the principal instructor? Is this person delivering entire, pick on chemistry, and Jean will be like, you don't know anything about chemistry, but the section that's on physical chemistry in Chemistry 103, is that portion only done by this person? You would want maybe that person to be an auxiliary instructor because they're the content expert about a particular portion of it. But it admittedly is a judgment. Does anyone else have?
But make sure you remember that these roles are also going to affect other systems. So in APHIS, if you're an auxiliary, you're not going to see your team taught courses, you're not going to see those evaluations. So if this is a course that you feel everyone's going to be teaching 2 weeks of it and they all want to see those evaluations, they need to be a principal. So you need to make sure that it will affect Canvas and also will affect what they see in APHIS.
So I'm going to reframe that and say, so if the principle is that this person is doing enough instruction that you think that they should be evaluated, that's another sign that you don't want to add someone as an auxiliary instructor just so they get an evaluation. But the idea is if they're doing that much instruction that they need evaluation, then they need to be an auxiliary instructor.
This person also needs to be with a proper instructional appointment type. So this is where the HR appointment of Assistant Registrar Will Lipsky is not a qualified instructional title. I would not be able to be assigned at the class section level because I wouldn't be loaded as part of the HR load process out there. So as part of the instructional titles, one needs to have a formal relationship with the university, and that formal relationship has to have an instructional title in order to be assigned to it too. So that might be another metric to determine whether or not that person is out there.
So
Jocelyn would like to add.
I was just going to say, and with that person going through HR and getting that instructional title, their credentials will be collected, and that is how your department chairs and the dean's office of your schools and colleges, who are the people who are responsible for verifying that the person is qualified to instruct in that course. That is how that will occur.
So I'm just going to repeat some of the things slightly differently. When we were talking about this, a lot of people have talked to a lot of people. The principal, again, I don't know, you guys have the definitions here. This is someone who is the responsible adult, right? They're responsible, they're conceiving the course, they're responsible instructor for the course. And then they have roles in grading, they have roles in Canvas, they have roles in evaluation. So how do you know? Partly because you want them to have authorization or they want access to certain things. The auxiliary, just to repeat, I'm going to actually say it a little differently, was actually designed when you want someone to have access to the course, we need to have it documented that they're involved. They want access to something, but they're not responsible for the grading. They don't pick the textbook. They don't write the syllabus. They come in, they might do one guest lecture or 3, and you want to evaluate them. So it's a person who has a minimal role, but you or our colleagues want them in the system so they can formally access components of the evaluation system, grading, whatever. You guys are on that.
And before the next question, I misspoke an important part of the instructor conversation, term roll. We actually don't term roll instructors with the exception of IND sections. So actually, I misspoke on that, apologies on there. But instructors are not term roll unless it's an IND, such as a thesis or a directed study, independent study session of it. So thank you to my RO colleagues for reminding me on that. Oh, I'm done. No, I'm not done.
Okay, next question is related to Canvas. So if the HR system drives Canvas, how will the timing of new hires be handled? It often makes sense for instructors, both principal and auxiliary, to have access to Canvas significantly earlier than the official start date.
So currently we're trialing a new process this semester with the department to see if we can get instructors in early before they have their HR appointment actually done. Like I said, it's a trial. So ideally what will happen is when the HR appointment occurs, that their net ID would actually get rolled. Now the question is, what role in Canvas should that person have? I would lean towards them having a instructional designer role so they're not seeing student data in the course, and then hopefully by the start of the term we have them in as a teacher. Like I said, we're just trialing that this semester for the first time, so it's too early to tell if it's working.
Okay, the follow-up to that is, will TAs who are the instructor of record show up as TA or instructor? It seems important for them to show up as instructor.
So if a TA is the instructor of record, so they are listed as the principal instructor, they will show up as the principal instructor. The only way that a TA will show up as TA is if they're listed as auxiliary in the course and their HR appointment lists them as a TA.
Okay, next question is, in APHIS, will the system be able to differentiate between a principal faculty and principal TA based on appointment type as entered by payroll?
So APHIS is a system that we are going to need to use instructor roles. When they started this discussion, I was really adamant and said we need to know the difference if it's actually a TA or if it's an actual instructor. So we're working with APHIS that they will pull the instructor role, and they will also pull HR appointments, so they will be able to differentiate Right now, that is not happening, remember, this is future, so that's the plan that we're going to have. So they will be able to tell if they're a TA or not.
Through a different data element than the instructor role.
Right.
Just to be clear.
Combination.
It's the combination of two elements, one of which we're not really talking about that much today.
And I just wanted to plug for APHIS, just so you know, it has to be in SIS to be an APHIS. I know we run into issues on that, so if you're going to want to evaluate an instructor, they have to be in SIS with one of these roles, or you cannot evaluate them.
You might have already answered some of this, but how will APHIS identify academic staff, faculty, TA, or neither? Does it depend on how the evaluation was set up?
So right now in APHIS, if you're an instructor, you can be an instructional academic staff or a faculty member. It doesn't differentiate between those. And in most departments, I don't think do that either. So they will be able to, once we have these new roles defined, they can then tell if it's a TA or if it's an instructor, and then they'll be able to keep those separate. I think that we can already talk about that. Can you clarify?
I just want to clarify, it's not the roles that determine whether they're a TA or faculty. There's going to be a separate HR pull from the HR system that will determine that. And it's the combination of the instructor and the HR that will enable that kind of distinction.
Okay, next question. So using supervisory instructor roles, can first-year graduate courses be primarily taught by advanced graduate students?
If they're in a teaching assistant appointment, no, they would have or a lecturer SA appointment. Those HR appointments by definition require supervision.
Okay, should instructor roles be displayed in external systems along with instructor name associated with its courses? Is this meaningful info for students?
I'm going to start with the display question first. So we are letting the outward facing for safety and security. We know there are some instructors that for, we'll say, stalking issues out there, we have some departments who do hide whether or not this person is assigned to the instructor out there. So first and foremost is safety. So there are some instances where we do have the display crank turned off out there. So there is always going to be that ability for forward-facing mechanisms to do that. Systems that absorb this information might be differently interested in this.
Yeah, so with Canvas, we want to identify who the primary instructor is or principal instructor to the students so they know who to communicate with when there's issues. I think we need to determine if we want supervisor to be shown to our students or not. I would probably lean towards no, but I'll be working with our instructional technology group to kind of hammer out how that should work.
I think this is perhaps a partial answer to that question. Within the new guide, there is a list of all of the people who have been listed as an instructor on a section of course in the past year, and it lists their name, their instructional appointment, professor, associate professor, lecturer, etc., and their qualifications, i.e. their highest degree earned. So that information is public. It isn't attached to specific courses, but it does let the public know, which is part of our accreditation requirements, who all of the people who taught classes at UW-Madison were.
Same with APHIS, when you ask an instructor-based question, it actually lists the instructor's name, so the student would know who they're evaluating. So if they're evaluating 3 instructors in the course, you basically ask that question 3 times, but it does list who the instructor is. And right now it doesn't list what their role or appointment is. That'll have to be something that we look into if that's something we need or not. I'm not sure if we even thought about that when we were talking with APHIS before. So.
I guess I would just add, I think should is sort of a loaded question, sort of an opinion. So I would say I do anticipate that knowing the instructor's role in a course might allow us to do some kind of more nuanced external reporting than we're able to do now. So right now we get requests from our legislature and other important figures that say, tell us for each faculty member at this university, tell me how many classes they taught last year. Well, right now, we can only use the single instructor field, but imagine if we had roles, we might be able to say Professor Jones taught 2 classes, was the supervisor in one other one, and was an auxiliary instructor in 3 more. That gives a better overall picture of their entire instructional duties rather than just a single count. So I don't know if should or shouldn't, but it is something that would be available that isn't now.
Okay, and talking about a couple of different systems here, so what flows into what, and what do we need to transfer manually, if anything?
Well, SIS, the Student Information System, is our single source of truth for information about classes, class sections, instructors, etc. So that is where all of the data entry as far as who's teaching what or through the course section builder in the future. And then that information is collected and sent out to CAFIS and Canvas and other systems.
The HR appointment will come from a different branch of PeopleSoft out there, but that's something that will also be absorbed through downstream systems like CAFIS, Canvas out there. So there's different data points. The HR, specifically, you are an associate professor, you are a lecturer. That's not going to be entered through Class Action Builder. We're going to allow HR offices to do what HR offices do. Class Action Builder will push information into SIS, which will then push information into Canvas, CAFIS, etc.
Okay, next question. Do we keep the current roles plus PSA or only PSA? If not, is there a way to see how many TAs taught how many sections versus faculty for budgeting purposes, etc.?
So can you PSA must be principal, supervisory, auxiliary.
Oh, okay.
So we actually never use the letters PSA, so I was using that acronym. So one more time.
We're so stuck on it.
PSA 2.
We made
Public
a new
service
acronym.
announcement.
Campus needs more. How do we keep the current roles plus PSA or only PSA?
Oh, so the faculty emeritus, etc., those current values are going to go away.
They will be, so if you're using them right now, they're a part of our academic information. We're not going to strip those from past terms, and so if you're using those, they will still be available. Part of Class Action Builder, that's not going to be an assignable value, and so if you wanted to put on the value of clinical, that just won't be an option for you to do out there. So the values as they are today will still be part of our history. We're not deleting history, rewriting history, but we are telling history using new roles effective summer 2018.
So Canvas will behave much the same way. So Canvas is just going to consume what is in SIS. So once we start using new PSAs in SIS or they will flow down that way. But we're not taking away the teacher role initially.
So people will still be able to pull historical data to see how many TAs taught versus faculty for their budgeting purposes.
Well, I might add though that that data is not very reliable. If you look up in the schedule of classes, the same person entered by multiple departments is different roles as it is. So I question the quality of that to begin with. Perhaps within a single department or subject, that would work. But you can always join the person's HR appointments live in the HR system. So even if it's not in the schedule of classes, you can still join the data to their HR appointments to get what that is.
It's a perfect segue into the next question. So how will we be able to combine the HR and payroll appointments to see the instructor role and the payroll appointment easily combined? So basically, is there an easy, efficient way of combining the data?
So just to not overcomplicate things, that yes, we're working on it. We could provide something to departments through one of our SDE query systems that would show you that. But there's nothing in, so around 30%, did you say, Jocelyn, of our staff at UW-Madison have multiple appointments. Just to be clear, there's nothing in the HR system that helps us understand for this person with multiple appointments, including multiple instructional appointments, I could pick on Jenny, that there's nothing that, if Jenny has 2 different appointments, she's an academic staff member in this department and an assistant dean in engineering, there's nothing that helps me decide under what role she is teaching any particular class. So that has to do with some local knowledge. Now in this case, only one of those appointments is an instructional appointment. Did I just invent an appointment for you that doesn't exist? But, only one of those is an actual instructional appointment, so we can make some assumptions that that's the appointment under which Jenny is teaching this class. But for people with multiple instructional appointments, you actually don't know. So joining the HR system and the curricular system is not technically difficult, but it does not provide 100% of the information that you requested there. There still has to be some judgment made, and the credits follow the instructor system is one way to do it. Perhaps we can expose the title under theirs, but all it is an algorithm. So really, I'll just give an example. So the credits follow the instructor system. Let me pick on the English department, and it says that, Professor Jones is teaching this class, and then we go out and say, does Professor Jones have an appointment in the English department? If the answer is yes, then we're just going to take that appointment and say that must be the one. And then, the sort of credits follow that way. But for people that do not have an appointment in the department that is offering the class, the algorithm is making some judgments about what the relevant appointment likely is. And it's probably, for analytic purposes, that's what we're using it for, but it might not be 100% correct because there is no exact way of doing that. I don't know if that answered.
Yep, just go ahead and ask your question. I'll repeat after.
Given that response, I'm curious how that's going to roll down into systems that impact direct instruction, like the campus system, where it's going to auto-generate particular roles, and you just said that there's not actually a way to know accurately what role they just have. So has there been thought put into how to change those roles?
I want to clarify, but I think there's an accurate way of knowing what the instructor's role is per section, because you will be entering that and you will presumably know that. But when the person has multiple HR appointments, there's not necessarily a way, other than you knowing which one. So when we were talking about how to pull in the HR table, if we're going to combine that data, I think we're going to look at sort of having a hierarchy. Is this person a faculty member? If not, do they have an instructional academic staff appointment? If not, do they have a TA appointment? Is sort of, and then that's how the TA role would be determined, I guess.
Yeah, so from a Canvas perspective, the only role that looks at the HR appointment will be the TA role. The rest of the roles will be based on the 3 primary roles that we're creating. It's only in the case of TA that we want to explicitly call that out if their appointment is TA.
Does that help? Or still?
The question is basically how is this information going to roll into other systems? There was some confusion around that. Okay, another question. This is specifically related to SIS, or the Student Information System. So currently it maintains schedule of classes in the meeting tab. The access currently for grading is approve, grade, or no access. So how is this use of this field changing, if at all?
Not at all.
The shortest I've ever heard them speak.
So that, not at all, is the implementation for summer 2018. We can move going forward if we want to build rules around if this, then not this role for grading access. But for the iterative design, as far as we're moving forward, it's not changing, not at all for summer 18. Grade and roster access is not changing for the initial implementation. If we create policy where these roles don't make sense to have these grade and roster accesses, we'll get those implemented in the iterative design, but right now, grade roster access is out of scope of the instructor role for initial rollout. I might be coming back to you fall 2018 saying we got this new, but that's where we're at right now.
I knew he had something to add.
Fine print always, for those of you who know well.
So this next question is in relation to how the campus and then broader, the legislature, is interested in tracking faculty versus lecturers and who are actually doing the teaching. So if somebody could talk about how we plan on tracking kind of who's actually doing the teaching and who's after that data specifically.
Never fight Justin for the microphone.
Do you want
No, I was trying to decide, I was buying time. Can you read the question again?
Yes, so I could just summarize this question, but basically this person is interested in how the campus and then more broadly how the legislature is interested in monitoring if faculty or lecturers are doing the teaching.
So can I start, Jocelyn, maybe? Because usually the question comes to us with the population.
We talked about the state. I think the question is about the budget requirement, not
Particular budget? Yeah.
not the person who asked that question still here. No.
Or not brave enough to.
So I'm going to
Take it.
So Claire was going to talk about times when we get citizen X or representative Y or whomever asking an important question about who's teaching what at our university. I think I'm going to take this question as the requirement that was in the budget that was passed last week. And it requires, don't have the language committed to memory yet, but the requirement is that we provide instructional workload metrics on all of our faculty and other instructors. So it's not really clear, and the operationalization of that is supposed to happen at system administration and the Board of Regents. So what I anticipate will happen is that we will that system admin will convene a working group and we will evaluate how we do this already. And in fact, we do this already. And the letter of the statute is met by information that is provided on the accountability dashboard that system administration publishes. So if you Google University of Wisconsin accountability dashboard, you will get a dashboard that has exactly the metric that is in the statute. And there are a couple of things that really matter to how that works out. One is that course instructor field gets filled out accurately, and you know the random cases where, oh, let's just put the same instructor in every one of those instructor fields, whether they're the instructor or not. That is not like a very helpful thing going forward. So that would be an example of something that we've seen that would not be good to do. So it's very important that who the instructor is really populating that field, and to the extent that you can, starting in summer 18, complete the roles, that will be helpful for driving things like APHIS and Canvas. The connection to their HR appointment then will have to come in behind. So we'll have the population of instructors and we'll connect that either to the payroll or to the appointment system. So stay tuned. The actual letter of the statute is already being met. So what we'll have to do differently is that, you know, oh, okay, so the course instructor. And then the other thing is, do any of you work with HR appointments or accounting side and know about the program code when you give someone an appointment? So it's the program, activity 246. Y'all, some of you are nodding. That is the other single most important driver in these metrics. So that's an aside, but make sure you have the right program code in there.
So I was just, the only thing I would add to what she said, but usually there's a workload reporting is often contextualized in with information about the person's appointment. So for example, a half-time, it's basically how many classes are you teaching relative to your appointment on program 2, for those of you that were nodding about it, right? So if only 20% of your appointment is supposed to be instructional related, your teaching one class looks different than if 100% of your appointment is paid on program 2. So previous things related to legislative reporting have always contextualized workload within your HR appointment. As Jocelyn said, it remains unclear how this will be implemented. It will be common system-wide, so Madison has some input, but certainly not decision authority on something like that.
Okay, next question. Where does the lecturer SA role fill? And what about TAs who have an MS degree?
Yeah. A lecturer SA is a student appointment type.
Yep.
It's a type of student appointment. So,
And that appointment is passed as part of the HR load to the instructor advisory table, which would make that assignable within the schedule of classes through class section builder.
By definition, those, the people with an appointment type of lecturer SA have to be supervised by a faculty member or regular instructional, person with a regular instructional appointment. So in those cases, they would need to have a supervisory instructor, regardless of what their own personal educational level of attainment is because of the appointment type.
Is that answer helpful? Okay. Can you explain whether the new instructor roles will help streamline your needs for campus-wide syllabi for each class? The question says, can you explain whether the new instructor roles will help streamline your needs for campus-wide syllabi for each class?
No.
That was even a shorter answer.
That was my answer. I thought maybe you had a better one.
Those of you who don't know already, the credit hour policy that was approved in the spring, and which is required under federal regulations that went into effect in 2013, does have a component and an expectation. One of the ways that when we get reviewed about whether we're meeting this federal mandate is to look on the syllabus. And so it is required that information about the credits and how that credit standard is met will be necessary, along with some other information on all syllabi, and we'll be talking more about that in the next few weeks. You'll start to hear more about that. That notice to go to the dean's offices in the spring in the flood of all the other things that they got. So you will start to hear about that, but that is to meet a federal requirement, a federal rule that went into effect in 2013.
I have another APHIS-related question. So please clarify what TAs will be able to do in APHIS. It looks like TAs could change evaluation or edit the questions. Is this correct?
No, these when it's able to edit the evaluation instrument, this is only course section questions. So we should probably clarify that. Only APHIS admins in each department actually create the questions and can edit those. Once those are created, you can always have a course section question. And in the past, it had to be just a principal, or they only have primary right now in APHIS. So one instructor could add course section questions. So let's say I was teaching a biology course and I tried a new virtual lab, for example. I wanted to see if my students actually thought that was beneficial to their learning, and I wanted to add that single question. In the past, it had to be just that principal instructor that did it. So we are saying if a TA is teaching a lab, they can add course section questions. So that's kind of the difference there. So it's specific questions that you're attaching to the department's course evaluation.
it's not editing the results of the questions. Like that.
I just want to ask that. It's just course-specific questions that you want to add additional, give it additional information about. So.
I'm sure a lot of you have department-specific questions, and I know a lot of our panelists will be available to stay after. We have about 7 minutes left, so we have enough time for 1 to 2 more questions if anybody has any additional questions. Yes?
So, I'm a new employee and I've been working about the email app, but I'm just wondering how will trainings change for new employees specifically for the next year? And then where should new employees start with risk software? Should they start with specific software that they want? Or is it better to blend it? What are your thoughts?
Can I repeat the question real quick? Yeah. Okay, so the question was, sorry, with video recording, we need this to be super clear. So the question, hopefully I've got it all, was basically for new employees, how will trainings for them change over the course of the next year with some of these changes? And then also, is there something that they should start with in terms of campus systems?
So the good news, as a new employee, you are on equal footing as a continuing employee for class action builder information. You're as new to it as all the rest of us out there. So the instructor, this is going to be the first system that will feel it because this is where it's going to be implemented as part of that. So as part of the training and onboarding for class action builder, we'll have guide, we'll have the decision tree as part of the process out there. Moving forward, if you were a new employee April 2018, there's going to be continuing offerings of class action builder because that's going to be a tool that we never know what a curricular rep is going to be onboarded. We have 287 of them out there right now. And so that's something that will be regularly introduced as far as to a new user how to use class action builder, and that will provide some documentation, including the decision tree and the definitions for it. As far as new employees and how they learn about Canvas and APHIS.
For APHIS, if you're a new employee, you need access to course evaluation, actually creating those. That needs to come from, generally comes from the department. They tell us they have a new employee and we add you in as an admin. Access. We do trainings every semester. Once you're added to the system, we add you to our APHIS user list, and then you find out about all the trainings that are offered.
For Canvas, we have a couple different methods of training. We have the 2 courses that everyone will see. So if you're an instructor, you'll see an instructor course. If you're a student or just a user, you'll see a student course that are self-paced you can go through. We also have regular face-to-face sessions on campus that are published on the UNAT website. Perspective that we hold on a regular basis.
Anyone have one last question? Yes?
So with regard to short-term staff, even if they're well qualified, will they still need a supervisor? And if we hire them in such a semester, will that be passed?
So the question was for short-term staff. Sorry, I'm going to have you repeat that first part.
Would a short-term staff person who one would assume has a perfect level of education, but they're, an adjunct more or less, still need to be supervised?
Okay, so would a short-term staff member, so adjunct, still need to be supervised? And if so, if they stayed on another semester, would that carry with them?
It is again up to the appointment type. An adjunct professor would not require supervision. But again, and a person's credentials are vetted and verified through the employment process, so they would be consistent to be a qualified instructor.
And that's about all we have time for today. I'm sure our panelists will stick around for a few moments. Thank you all so much for coming. We know it's a busy time of year. And this video, as well as the PowerPoint slide, will be available on the Registrar's Office website, and I will be emailing that link out to everybody, so not only the people that RSVP, but also those that could maybe not attend in a few days. Thank you.